Hey guys, longer video today, and the reason I'm doing this is because Blue from our Ballad of Iris series reached out and has one last story to share, and I thought this would be a great time to cover it and then also kind of tie a bow on that Ballad of Iris saga. So if at any point in this video you say, hey, I think I've heard that story, it's because it's 3 different stories I've covered in the past, which I'll mark in the video description below. But there is a video at the end for those who just want to skip ahead and listen to that, so make sure to check the description for the chapters I've added. So please sit back, enjoy this 2-hour special, and sorry for the varying mic quality, I recorded this over a number of weeks. And remember, there's a lot of heavy stuff in these stories. I wouldn't exactly call them safe for work, so keep that in mind. And looking back over the series, I just want to say that it seems like Iris is coming from a place where they're very uncomfortable and they inflict that pain onto others in some kind of power trip. It's really sad to see, but when Dungeons & Dragons is an escape for many people, those that may very well be hurt individuals themselves kind of inflict that pain onto others. So never put up with it in your party. Greetings adventurers and welcome to the Loot Goblin Marketplace. Today's treasure goes by the name of the Ballad of Iris, Infinite Unsexy. This appears to be an ongoing story about a self-identified asexual DM that puts a lot of players through not safe for work situations and has a loose understanding of what consent is. Make sure to check the description below to see additional stories that I'll likely be covering from this writer in future weeks. Let's jump right into it and make sure to like and subscribe to the video. It's really helped the channel grow over the last few months. Trigger warning, mentions of SA, general creepiness, and failed sluttery. My current gaming group is filled with wonderful people who I consider to be found family. They're hilarious, they're supportive, they're beautiful inside and out. The person who brought us together, not so much. This story is of a single problem player our group had with our former dungeon master, the person we shall call Iris. At the time of these stories, our group consisted of the DM Iris and various players who I will refer to by various character classes as they come up. Iris, supposedly an asexual person, had a very odd relationship with sex and sexual content. This combined with Iris's odd and seemingly random decision-making in-game led to some very uncomfortable moments in the various games they ran. Some of these stories I witnessed, some other players told me about after the fact. For example, the group has a strict no SA and always fade to black rule, and our games have always pretty much been safe for work. However, the rules never seem to apply to Iris. My first unusual bit of sexual conduct with Iris was when I was making my first character for our traditional fantasy setting, and I settled on a living doll healer a rich father had made for his sickly daughter. In the middle of talking about this extremely wholesome story where this little girl gets my character as a gift to protect and care for her, Iris cuts in with, "Do you think the father would have had her made anatomically correct so he could use her in other ways too?" And I just kind of sat there for a second in confused and stunned silence. I believe Iris picked up on my uncomfortable state as I quickly accepted my, no, her entire purpose is healing, and hastily changed the subject. At the time, this seemed like a poorly thought out question, but in context with the other stories, it helps paint a rather gross picture. Psychic told me later in the prequel campaign that after Iris railroaded Psychic's character into dying, Iris forced Psychic to play a clone of the same character, made and controlled by a villain, who ripped off a chunk of hair of Psychic's head earlier on. This same villain had been using the clone as a sex doll up until Psychic was forced to play them. It was a while after this in the same campaign I had needed to retire the doll character and make a new character. After, Iris forced me to have the doll out her entire backstory to the party, or they would withhold a level up when we got to our next, much larger Crimson Flag. The party, my new idiot in tow, went to a bar to celebrate officially joining the Adventurers Guild. In general, it was a great way to introduce my character to the group, and was silly and fun, and then 2 terrible mini-stories happened back to back. First, Psychic, an ancient character afraid of their own magic, decided to ride the high of joining the Adventuring Guild and gathered the courage to flirt with the patron of the bar, who turned out to be a florist named Leah. Leah, being another anxiety-riddled idiot but pretending to be bold, invited Psychic to go on a walk in the starlight, which eventually led to Leah dragging Psychic to her house. There our 2 anxiety-riddled friends made out a bit, and then Iris prompted Psychic for a sex performance role, something none of us had discussed or agreed to, and rolled for Leah as well. Psychic rolls okay, but for whatever reason, when Leah rolls low, Iris has her have a panic attack. This, of course, has Psychic say they stop and try to comfort the panicking NPC, trying to stop the scene, and Iris has Leah insist they continue. Psychic tried to back out, citing the panic attack and their character maybe being ace anyways, but Iris has Leah keep pushing with lines like, "She wants this, she feels bad, she wants you." Psychic eventually relents and allows the act to happen in a fade to black, obviously reluctantly. This was our first weird encounter with Leah, who we're pretty sure would spontaneously become a big bad evil guy, but that's a different story. The second encounter that came out of that bar crawl is one I feel slightly responsible for, as the NPC involved was one I had made up as part of my new backstory, but Iris definitely took it places none of us were comfortable with. Barbarian was a sweet gay Leonin who was exploring his sexuality and met up with an NPC Loxodon guard, Mr. Egg. Mr. Egg was the first openly gay character Barbarian met in the game, so he had some really great roleplay exploring being open with that with Mr. Egg, which led to Mr. Egg inviting Barbarian to go see his weapon collection, which Barbarian, a budding forge master, eagerly accepted. It was a seemingly cute but awkward moment, which was immediately ruined by Iris asking for a sexual performance role from Barbarian. Apparently Iris thought it was obvious this was where that would go, while Barbarian's player was of the opinion that Barbarian wasn't ready for that. After a bit of pushing, Barbarian rolls for performance, and while I don't remember the role, 15 or 16 maybe, I do remember Iris describing it as painful and uncomfortable. This was made even worse by Iris telling Barbarian that he was on the bottom, as he's bigger than you don't have a choice. This elicited nervous noises and awkward silence, Iris being the only one who seemingly didn't care that they just insinuated that Barbarian was essayed by the guard, who was supposed to be my character's friend. Thankfully, after Barbarian carefully avoided Mr. Egg the next day, the guard never appeared again. Timeskip all of 3 sessions later, after the party had yet another encounter with the big bad evil guy robot for the 4th time in 10 sessions up to that point, and the party decided to relax by going to a gay bar. Apparently gay clubs are all the rage in medieval Europe. We managed to elude an incel beefcake, who we can't even mention to this day without Rogue wanting to vomit, and my character guided the party to their destination and everyone set up about flirting, making friends, or attempting to get shit-faced. Some of us succeeded. Rogue ended up being manipulated into a negative one-night stand, the very first time they ever flirted with a satyr who made it very clear they had lied about all the getting to know you talk the night before, and just wanted to know what it was like to f*** a hero, because apparently just being level 5 makes you the hero in a setting that goes to level 25. There was a performance roll, it did not matter, Iris always says the sex is bad. Meanwhile, across the bar, my character, who is well known and well liked not only in this bar but also the city, and is known as a cheery cinnamon roll slut, who gives out kisses and compliments in abundance, somehow continuously fails to find anyone even remotely interested in sleeping with her anywhere she goes, as, "Your species is weird and not attractive to most people." My species was a custom one, which was basically a bunch of wide-hipped short stacks who love cuddles, and Iris talked about attractive goblins at least once, but fair enough, I guess. Hopping over to a campaign that lasted exactly 1 session before Iris cancelled it, after I made an entire custom culture and multiple maps for them, we encountered another one of Psychic's characters, an Arachne who had been raised by a cult as the Chosen One. The Arachne came to my character's home from some intel and tried to shake hands with myself and the rogue. Iris prompted Rogue for perception check as her oddball character sniffed Psychic's hand, and said that her fingers smelled like another woman. I, being the wise and intuitive person I am, said, I don't get it, which earned us an explanation that Psychic's character had been fingering the cultist leader. This came as a shock to the Psychic, who had never said that, agreed to that, roleplayed that, or even had been told that. In fact, what the Psychic had been told was that she saw the cult leader as a mother figure. This never received any explanation. Maybe I can provide some explanation here, because reading this story there seems to be a continuous recurring theme. I think you guys did everything right by having it be a lighthearted theme where relationships can happen for story reasons, but if anything needs to be explained, it's simply fade to black and then move on. Keeping it as safe for work as possible is always the best way to approach these situations. It seems like instead of having it as just a quick side note so that characters can establish relationships and then hopefully settle down at the end of their stories, the DM wants to focus on the theme that everything's abusive, everything's unpleasant, everyone's trying to use you. And the doll is a perfect example of this too, because there's nothing weirder and more telling, I think, than asking if the father who commissioned a doll for his daughter would do something like that. If nothing else, you're gonna have to keep this DM away from the toy store because I think they're gonna start drilling holes in all the dolls. Here's part 2. So Iris had, and presumably still has, an irritating habit of starting new campaigns and immediately canceling them. For whatever reason, this didn't seem like such a problem at the time, perhaps because the group was some truly wonderful people, but regardless, 3 campaigns lasted longer than any of the others. Most of the stories in part 1 was from the traditional fantasy campaign. The 1920s campaign using Mage the Awakening had lots of problems including player targeting and physical impossibilities, but was thankfully mostly free of the sexual problems plaguing the others. Iris made a canon that Barbarian was a oof without player input, making them sleep with most of their co-workers. And then there was a steampunk campaign. Psychic was constantly harassed from multiple sides throughout the campaign, mostly by a mind-altering mage named Clementine, who nearly half the party was attracted to by the time the campaign ended, one of us even joking about considering having their character cheat with her. Anyways, lots of things happen, and Psychic and Clementine agreed a deal where they pretend to be dating to gain access to each other's resources. They would hold hands and kiss each other on the cheek to convince others. Well, this all culminated in Clementine arriving at the party's base to take Psychic on a date so they could get the ball rolling. This backfired when Fighter followed them stealthily and then continued following them, and as Clementine and Psych entered a warehouse and went to the windowed office, instead of having them, close the blinds to block out onlookers, Iris announced that they'd be convincing Clementine and Psychic have sex on the couch in the warehouse office for literally no reason. Psychic, who is a rather non-confrontational person usually, stated that their character is absolutely not interested in Clementine, and that she had been terrorized by Clementine's past harassment. The campaign ended before we could see any more down that storyline, probably for the best. Oh, and Iris ignored our fade to black rule and ruled that Fighter saw everything from a nearby rooftop. Rogue and I decided to have a shared backstory. I would play a gunslinger who loved tinkering, was socially anxious, and was secretly sneaking off to meet his monster girlfriend. Normal things. Rogue, on the other hand, as she calls her, a Barbie barbarian. Rogue character was big, strong, angry, and definitely not interested in girls. No siree, no queerness here. The thing that linked our characters together was that we were both engaged to one of a set of extremely controlling twin brothers, rich humans who had been risen rapidly through the ranks of nobility. Rogue and I went into a lot of detail fleshing out the twins, as confronting them would eventually be our characters' personal caps, most likely for the campaign. We were extremely clear with what we wanted when we spoke to Iris. Rogue's fiance would be a cold fixer, a man obsessed with finding broken things and making them work the way he wanted. In this particular case, the thing the brother, who I'll call Taser, had decided he wanted to fix was Rogue's character. She was angry, violent, and aggressive. He wanted her to be placid and obedient. Taser had no interest in Rogue physically. Rogue told Iris, just in changing her behavior. Iris apparently didn't hear that part. On the other end of the stick, we had my character's fiance, who she was forcefully engaged to after being caught with her girlfriend, who was disguised as a maid at the time. This man, who we'll call Hypno, enjoyed cruelty, inflicting fear, and had no interest in fixing my character, just scaring her into obeying him. He used mind control to make anyone my character asked for help forget her plea, and threaten all their lives if she didn't stop throwing a fuss. Hypno enjoyed inflicting pain and fear and nothing else, I told Iris. Apparently Iris didn't hear that part. During a session, Rogue found herself in Taser's home, having a dinner with her fiance, where they discussed the future and he talked about his plans to deal with her anger, which included medication. Apparently he had went ahead and had some made and slipped into Rogue's food, and on a failed con save, Rogue temporarily lost the ability to rage. She panicked, the situation escalated, and when Rogue attacked Taser, he calmly pulled out a stun gun and knocked her unconscious, all while staying cold and collected, exactly as we're hoping for. So at the moment, everything for Rogue seemed bleak and good, and it was going to feel so wonderful to smash this guy into the ground at the end of the campaign. Iris informed Rogue she would later wake up in a guest bed. Okay, said Rogue, thinking the dude had obviously had her change to her night clothes. I grabbed my clothes, get dressed, and... oh good. I'm glad I didn't have to say it, Iris said. There was a pause as we mulled over what they had just said. The tone, the context, everything else all added up to one thing, which Iris would later confirm went against all our rules, and Rogue never had a chance to discuss her consent to. Iris had had Taser assault Rogue's character while she was asleep. The line about not having to say it still makes Rogue shiver. A serious breach of trust. In a further breach that would display that not only did Iris not listen to our breakdowns of our villains, but also that they had no respect for our consent nor ideas. Iris later revealed the motivation they had given the twins. They were true vampires and wanted to use your characters as broodmares to pass down their bloodline. Please keep in mind Iris added this to these characters, but said that the original version of Hypno I asked for, who was slightly handsy, like touching her thigh at their engagement dinner and such, was far too far. And if I ever told anyone that I wanted a character to be a bit of a handsy jackass, that Iris would kick me from the campaign on the spot. So you know, double standards. TLDR. DM makes rules against forced sexual content, forces lots of sexual content. Sex in game always happens if it's the DM's idea, but never happens if it's the player's idea. You know, after commenting on the first part, I'm not surprised that it continued through all these different campaigns. The thing that actually surprises me the most, though, is the fact that they would start and stop so many campaigns. I wonder if the DM just really likes punishing player behavior, and every time that they don't go along with this really messed up fan fiction thing, they scrap the campaign and move on to the next one. Because that's the only explanation I have of why they would stop every time one of these situations goes bad. Unless they feel like a second of guilt and say, oh crap, I went too far. Maybe if I reset the campaign, everyone will forget the awful thing I just did. I think I just might be being too generous here. I'm glad you guys found good players, and I'm glad you're no longer in that DM's campaign. Greetings adventurers, and welcome to the Loot Goblin Marketplace. Today's treasure goes by the name of the Ballad of Iris, Your Free Time is Mine. And you might actually recognize the first two parts of this story as I read it earlier on this channel. If you haven't, I've linked it below, and make sure to like and subscribe to the video as it's really helping the growth of this channel, and I'm always grateful for you guys helping out. Let's jump right into the video, but I do want to shout out the fact that there's already another part, so expect a third video, if not more, as this poster keeps on adding new stories to the Ballad of Iris. So, I recently posted some of the horror stories about a former DM of my player group, and it really didn't cover even a small portion of the horror that Iris afflicted upon us. And as some people asked for more details, the group got together to decide what to make a big post of next. In the meantime, please enjoy, or suffer through, this uncurated selection of small to major problems caused by Iris that aren't worth their own post. And yes, we know we should have left sooner. Iris would call us constantly, they knew our schedule, and would call us on Discord at any point they thought we'd even remotely likely to be online. On my lunch break? Oh, it's an incoming call. I should be getting off work. Incoming call. You came online for 30 seconds? Call. You just ended a call with Iris? Call every single day, every single player. The only way to stop Iris from calling you was to either bluntly say, stop calling me, or to put yourself offline on Discord and refuse to answer any incoming calls. Being offline was still not enough in some cases, as Iris did not care, even if they knew you were at work. Some of the players tried going into Do Not Disturb mode, only to find Iris would call anyways. Some of the players, like myself, nearly always answered, because I'm dumb, and others figured out they need to avoid these calls at all costs to keep their sanity. Iris only worked 8 hours a week, and calling us was basically their hobby. Iris publicly accused Psychic, my amazing friend and sorcerer player, of not being dedicated enough to the group because they didn't join a call once due to needing to work on homework for their bachelor's degree. Iris publicly talked about possibly kicking players who had been in the group for months because they missed one session. Iris threw a massive and public hissy fit when we suggested we postpone a boss fight session due to our ranger, our only healer in the campaign, needing to miss the session. This suggestion was made because the boss was, as Iris put it, a CR40 homebrew monster that had roughly 1000 health and would automatically cast Power Word Kill. We were level 10. Iris threatened to withhold a level up for the group if my character didn't out herself with her entire backstory 5 sessions into a campaign. The character's identity was the only secret she had, and another character's backstory had already been forcefully outed in the same session. Constantly spoiled upcoming characters, fights, etc. to a party who did not want to hear it and said as much, attempted to spoil other party members as well. When I launched my very first campaign, I invited Iris, informing them it was a serious campaign, so please bring a serious character. They brought in the jokiest nerd with a lisp I've ever heard and interrupted everyone until they rage quit. Their character immediately latched onto the character of the player they had a crush on, and it was very awkward. There are several posts worth of creepy behavior from Iris towards Rogue, but we'll post those later. Later, when Iris made a new character for my campaign and rejoined, they noped out before their first session as that character, and then constantly jumped in and out of the call throughout the session. irritating everyone and sometimes making random noises. This forced us to make a new server Iris couldn't access just for that campaign. Iris would declare a start time, and if everyone showed up early, Iris would immediately start the game without asking anyone if it was 30 minutes until game time. Due to this, multiple players started joining calls only at the last minute, as this is disrespectful and took away our table talk time. Iris would ping specific players constantly in the lead up to a session, even if the player had already told them they would be there in a minute. Iris did not ask people if they were ready to start. Iris told all of us not to tell anyone else if we were going to miss session, only them. This led to at least once where those who showed up were blindsided when the session was cancelled due to having too few players right at the start time. If anyone was late and did not tell Iris, they would cancel session immediately at start time. If 2 players would miss or be late, session would also be cancelled. Even if they messaged Iris that they were 5 minutes from their house, they were literally 2 minutes late, or if they were in a restroom and would be right there. The only exception was Iris wanted to play without a certain player. Iris would do random time skips in game without giving players a chance to object. Iris would hold votes where all the voters were public in an attempt to shame anyone who voted red on whatever Iris wanted to do. Iris would get upset if people didn't vote within an hour of the post being made, even if it was posted in the middle of the night. We all had players all around the world in different time zones. Iris would mess with the player character sheets in the middle of session, deleting items and abilities from player sheets because they suddenly decided the ability was overpowered. They also forced one player to play champion fighters in every campaign and then deleted their abilities in the middle of the session, as well as a character Iris themselves made. Iris kept trying to make short rests a whole day and long rests a week without changing encounter rate, and would sometimes try to make classes that get short rest abilities have triple the resources. We have a nightmare story about that and Rogue in particular. Required us to use ridiculous encumbrance rules that made 5 books weigh the same as a large barrel filled with ale. This led to Sorcerer who could only carry 3 books and a toolkit, and a Barbarian who could carry 10 barrels of ale somehow. Iris would get incredibly upset if any player had any small noise come through their mic while Iris was talking, or if any player was at any time away from their seat when Iris randomly decided to throw a fight at us. Keep in mind we all play over Discord. This was incredibly hypocritical considering Iris started taking walks in the middle of the session, sometimes for the entire duration of a session, even if they knew we had important combat at the start. During these walks, Iris would go to the grocery store, spend enormous amounts of time shopping, spend time standing next to a very loud beeping object that are placed all over their hometown without ever muting themselves, and starting conversations with bystanders that would sometimes last for multiple minutes without muting, halting our roleplay. Nearly every walk, the call would be interrupted by Iris yelling out, "Oh, hey there, champ," because they saw a dog that lived on the route that they would always walk. The worst part was Iris decided that in order to better facilitate these walks, all combats would become theater of the mind. This was especially bad because Iris has the absolute worst sense of distance I've ever heard of, sometimes thinking a small shop should randomly be over 120 feet wide, sometimes calling 30 feet too far to see, and sometimes saying 60 feet blind sight isn't large enough to see the second floor of a regular store. At one point, a major hub of an inn the party frequented was supposedly at the center of the world's largest city, was declared too small to host more than 20 people. Iris would randomly add new players at the start of the session without telling anyone they were doing so. Then Iris would kick them just as suddenly because of various reasons. This happened so often we had a player get burnt out because of it, and we had to hold an intervention to get them to stop because it was almost weekly. I know you said not to say it, but I'm gonna say it. You should have left a lot sooner. What surprises me about this is Iris clearly has a lot of guidelines on how they want the campaign to be run, and some of them I can totally respect, but obviously the hypocrisy of how she can do things versus how the players can is the most infuriating thing here. Going out on walks, it's weird. As a player, maybe you could get away with it as long as you're doing push to talk, but obviously as a DM, actively sacrificing the integrity of the game, making it theater of mind and doing a very poor job at that, it's just an indicator of how little she values the other people's free time, because obviously every moment of every hour they're setting up for these games. You know, they're calling about it, they're harassing players about it, they're constantly finding new players and then kicking them because, you know, they're ruining everyone's time. But somehow, I guess they can run errands because, you know, who cares if the dungeon master's at their table? It really is just a wild situation that I'm surprised you guys put up with. But I will admit, it is giving me a lot of content. And I really hope to hear by the end of this series, because it seems like Betrayal Mountain is another multi-parter in the Ballad of Iris. I hope that after that, though, we're able to hear all the great things going on in your new campaign, as hopefully one of you guys have stepped up as a DM, because that's the only way you're going to guarantee avoiding someone like this in the future. But wait, did you think that was all? We have another part of the Ballad of Iris already ready to go. It's called A Not So Gentle Repose. Hey there, us again, this time with a story about how my group's former DM, who we will call Iris, railroaded the party into a boss fight, promised us that it was winnable, and then killed the barbarian in 2 rounds. So there's more to this story that isn't quite mine to tell, a party member is working on writing that, but the important lead up to the death of our furry friend is as follows. The group consisting of me playing as a sorcerer, our psychic, barbarian, rogue, bard, and ranger all went to a tavern filled with criminals seeking Psychic's father, who we had been told by Psychic's aunt was being held captive there. In the first session involving the tavern, our level 4 party had to fight off around 15 bandits when they ambushed us, leaving us with very few resources for what came next. We went upstairs and found several cages hanging from a ceiling above us, around 40 feet up. We couldn't identify which cage contained Psychic's father, as they had never met him, and there were dozens of people in each cage. We searched around a bit, and Bard found a series of levers and couldn't identify which controlled which, so he just pulled one at random. Instead of a cage coming down, or a trap going off, this summoned an angel, and the session ended with him staring down at us. The next session rolls around and we get a bit of context that apparently the thieves on the first floor were extremely incompetent and had been relying on the blessing of the angel, who had been bound to a lever for some reason, to not get caught. Rogue recognized what the angel was, and the angel proceeded to try and get Rogue to accept some sort of deal. In the process, the angel outed himself as the manifestation of thievery, and my character, who was a naive goody-goody, called down the stairs to the guards below that, hey, there's another thief up here. This resulted in the angel throwing a hissy fit and immediately starting a boss fight. I cannot stress enough for context here that Iris swore up and down leading up to this encounter that this was a winnable boss fight. In their words, it's about a 50-50. We literally had no choice but to come here. Iris was rather a fan of railroading. Regardless of this promise of a fair fight, the first round opens up with the angel summoning 6 ghostly jellyfish out of the mouths of the people in the cages. We quickly discover that they do range psychic damage and averaged around 10 damage a turn while refusing to come anywhere close to us and allowing the melee fighters to target them. The only party member who was able to use ranged attacks at this point after the previous fight were my character with the 2nd level spell left and the ranger with their arrows. To make this worse, Bard, who instigated the encounter, had to miss the session, and instead of lowering the fight difficulty or playing Bard for the fight, Iris ruled Bard fell unconscious at the start of the fight. Additionally, Iris and I had built a custom culture for my character's species which viewed jellyfish as a manifestation of the soul, meaning she was completely unwilling to harm the manifestations because she assumed, and I was told I would need my whole action to figure out if this was true, that these jellyfish were the prisoner's souls. As if that was not enough, Iris had created Psychic's spell list and only given Psychic a single weak attack cantrip. The fight starts and the angel either went first or second and immediately used some ability to steal Ranger's ranged attack skills. Then when Psychic attacked Angel, Angel was resistant to psychic damage. This was immediately followed up by my character's guiding bolt, doing resisted radiant damage. Then all the jellyfish used ranged attacks on Barbarian, bringing him to low health. 2 guards rushed up the stairs, the jellyfish killed them instantly. Then 6 additional jellyfish spawned. Rogue used their first turn to try and convince the angel to let them take the deal and stop combat, to which the angel responded, she called the guards. I cannot, through text, do justice to the screechy, high-pitched voice. One of us rolled and saw that Angel was basically undamaged after taking attacks from the entire party, minus the rogue and the unconscious bard. In the second round, Barbarian immediately goes down to more jellyfish attacks, and they continue to attack him until he was dead without any saves. Once again, we were level 4 and now facing an angel and 12 basically untouchable ghost jellies, with more on the way. With Barbarian down, the angel turned his sights on Ranger next. Trying to salvage something from the situation, I used Shatter on the floor below Barbarian, dropping his body and a couple party members to the first floor so they could bolt, then had my character dash down the stairs. The angel and jellies pursued, but we managed to escape, passing the saves to bring Barbarian's corpse with us. What followed next was some truly gorgeous roleplay from the party, some of them lashing out at my character for provoking the angel, some of them simply grieving for our sweetheart Leonin, Barbarian, as he asked with his dying breath if he had managed to protect us, and my character running off at full tilt, desperately trying to find someone to bring him back as she did not yet have Revivify. Eventually the rogue and I made a deal with an enchanter for a scroll of Raised Dead, which became its own series of horror stories, which I will post later I'm sure. And we sat and mourned with brilliant roleplay of my friend's parts as we waited for the scroll. The death of Barbarian also revealed to my naive divine soul that she had been scammed. She had purchased, using her entire savings, 12 ribbons of immortality, which she credited to saving her life in her introduction session. She and Barbarian had quickly become close friends, and she had given him a ribbon to protect him. Her learning the truth was devastating for her, and is something Barbarian brings up fondly still. Along the way, the party reached out to my old character who the Barbarian was close to, and she came to give her condolences, a gift for his awakening, and cast Gentle Repose to help in whatever way she could. This was immediately punished by the DM. Instead of Gentle Repose merely preventing the dispersal of Barbarian's soul and his body from rotting, Iris pulled Barbarian into a private call where they explained in explicit detail how, into their setting, Gentle Repose caused constant extreme torture to the soul of the body it is cast on, as it prevented them from joining the cycle of the underworld torture instead. Iris suddenly retconned the torturous underworld to be much nicer than Gentle Repose, the spell with gentle in the name. Thankfully, Iris allowed me to take the spell back after all that was said, and Barbarian player came back explaining the torture, but honestly, it just felt like punishment for trying to do something nice in character. That would later become a common theme. Regardless of the context around it, the roleplay around Barbarian's death is still one of our favorite things we've been through as a group. Unfortunately, much of the love of that whole moment was thrown out of the gosh darn window when Iris decided to make it so that the mission that had brought us there was actually fake, as Psychic's real dad was the living embodiment of imagination and had cooked up the whole quest as a way to introduce himself. We are completely certain Iris retconned this into existence several sessions after the tavern incident because a couple of us had chatted after the game that Psychic's family seemed kinda one-note and unreliable. Iris also used this in-game retcon to beam absolute certainty into Psychic's head that their mom was the big bad evil guy. Then not 30 seconds later, Iris changed their mind and said never mind, you aren't certain. By the way, if anyone is curious, Iris showed us the boss fight sheet. I did the math. The fight was statistically unwinnable even if Bard had been conscious. Additionally, Iris later revealed that they had accidentally used a slightly stronger version of the jellyfish than the version they had shown us. TLDR, Dungeon Master kills off a player character in a railroaded, unwinnable boss fight that they swore was winnable, then invalidates the whole thing with a "it was all a dream" reveal, when we didn't like a character while still leaving the character death in. The Ballad of Iris is really a compelling series of stories because it has every single type of bad DM and bad player that you can put all within one story. So in that original two-parter, The Infinite Unsexy, it was very not safe for work focused, but I have to hand it to Iris. They managed to be a terrible DM in more ways than just forcing the not safe for work encounters. They like to do a little bit of player agency removal by constantly retconning things. They like to do the unwinnable fight, but then pretend that it's your fault as the player that you messed up, and just good old-fashioned railroading. And based on what this writer keeps saying, the next part that goes by the name of Betrayal Mountain, that's going to be a doozy. All signs point to that being the worst offender. By comparison, this is just a little interlude, just a simple railroad into a near TPK experience, something that, we all totally go through. But I will be making sure that Betrayal Mountain comes out, hopefully next week, as part 1 seems to be released, but it's called part 1 of a lot, so we'll see how many parts that ends up being, because I plan on putting all of the Betrayal Mountain arc, geez, they're arcs now, in one video. Greetings adventurers, and welcome to the Loot Goblin Marketplace. Today marks the finale of the Ballad of Iris, which includes a 3-part called Betrayal Mountain, as well as an epilogue kind of provided from 2 different players' experiences. I think it's really cool that we get a conclusion. That's not something we always see on this channel, so make sure to stick around to the end to see how the players ended up. And before we get into the video, make sure to like and subscribe and share the channel, and if you want to listen to the first 2 before or after this story, I think you can really do it in any order. Check the description below because I have the first 2 parts in there. Let's get right into the video. Hello and welcome back to yet another installment of the tragic story of my party's interactions with our former DM, who we call Iris. We're still working our way through some of the larger problems, but for now, it's time to talk about some of the in and out of the group betrayals and small ridiculous things Iris did. Some of these are the in-game kind, an NPC suddenly turning evil out of nowhere, plot twists that make less than 0 sense, the classic stab in the back, but most of these betrayals are aimed at the wonderful group I play with, betrayals of our trust. I will refer to all other players as the class they were playing in the first game I joined the group in, regardless of the actual class at any given time. This was originally going to be 2 posts, but we already have 8 pages typed out and we aren't done, so buckle up. As always, thanks for reading. We know we're dumb for tolerating this, and I hope you enjoy our suffering. This story happened shortly before I joined the group, so I'm relying on the testimony of 3 of the other players who were there. In the high-level prequel campaign to the traditional fantasy one I was brought into the group for, everyone played demigods. The demigod party had been working for a council of people who planned to betray them. Aside, Iris loves evil councils, and one of the council members who was traveling with the party, actually her simulacrum, confessed to the planned betrayal, ripped some of Psychic's hair out, and teleported away in a cutscene. Psychic at the time playing a rogue who was sent by her mother, the goddess of death, the Edge, to take out people who had eluded their natural end, track down the council with the party. Iris proceeded to egg Psychic on to stab the council member. Considering Psychic was playing an assassin rogue with the ability to cut characters' max HP when they hit, it should have been devastating. Iris encouraged Psychic to sneak away from the party to do said stabbing and eventually convinced Psychic to do so in a mini session. Psychic snuck in undetected, did their sneaky stabby, and your dagger glances off her skin. For whatever reason, Iris made all the councilmen invincible. They had apparently just taken their invulnerability potions, had aid cast on them, etc, etc. This was extra dumb because they were all actually simulacrums, so their deaths literally wouldn't have mattered. Psychic, panicking, turns around and tries to bolt out of the room only to find that there is now an invisible one-way barrier blocking them from leaving the room. Psychic tries to use the message cantrip to contact the party, who is within visible range, but Iris, who I mentioned in the previous post had no sense of distance, ruled the party was barely too far away for the cantrip to work. Iris implied that there was no way for Psychic to leave the room, and so they had to fight the council's invincible simulacrums and various archers by themselves and inevitably died. Iris then publicly mocked Psychic for not misty stepping with the DC roll through the impenetrable barrier. Iris forced all demigods to take levels in Divine Soul. After this sudden, inevitable character death and subsequent disintegration, Iris came to Psychic and told them that their hair-ripping council member from before had created a clone of her, and that she would now be playing this evil clone. See Infinite Unsexy post controlled by the council. Psychic was to lead the party into a trap and betray them in the same room where their original character died. Their order was to stab the first party member they could when the fight broke out. Psychic did the stabbing, and just as she was getting excited to play the role of betrayer, Iris informed them that they morphed into a generic monster that fought the party. Cue TPK against immortal enemies, and monsters you would think the game ends there. It did not. What followed this was a deal with the goddess of evil, several boss fights, a whole bunch more simulacrums, a second deal with the goddess of evil, look forward to that in future posts, some depressing roleplay, and a boss fight with the god of destruction while the zombie apocalypse happens in the background. Q1 disintegration and resurrection of Rogue later, Psychic is told she has to obey her deal with the goddess of evil and run off to go do stabbery. Bard, a crazy multiclass at this time, has sworn in-game to protect Psychic's character and goes to follow her to the ends of the earth. Iris didn't like this, and it would interfere with their future plans, so at the start of the epilogue, Iris rules Bard turns to dust because Iris said so. Rogue's character swears to hunt Psychic down and not rest until she succeeds. Iris instantly cuts to decades later, tosses a romantic interest at Rogue, and declares that by the start of the next campaign, she would drop from level 20 to level 12. Even though Rogue's player said that she would keep training and hunting Psychic forever until she was put out of her misery. In contrast, we have Psychic's updated boss fight character sheet. Brace yourself before reading onward. Psychic's former character turned goddess of evil minion would be tortured for centuries and then gain a passive stealth of 40. An automatic hit guarantee that deals a guaranteed 170 damage with no save against anything she hits while stealthed. Oh, and anything she killed was permanently unrevivable as long as she was not erased from existence. On top of this, the former edgy assassin literally could not die as long as the goddess of evil existed. Shadow the Edgehog had nothing on Cass. This is the Cliff Notes version of the story, as I wasn't there and don't have an incredible saint-like patience required to explain the rest of the chaos. Iris told the players that they didn't have to keep track of travel items on their character sheets, such as tents, bedrolls, rations, etc. Iris constantly checked our character sheets and would sometimes punish us for not having those items. You don't have a tent on your sheet, so you have to sleep outside. Because you're sleeping on the ground, your clothes are becoming damaged over time. Because clothes were ripped because of this, the NPCs would instantly know these characters weren't local, or they would stand out. Iris insisted we carefully track the inventory space of every item. A character who brought a tent and a bedroll might not be able to carry anything else if their strength was 6 or so. Notably, my cleric was only able to bring a single dagger, a ring, a notebook, her clothes, and a flask. She originally had 2 daggers but wasn't strong enough to carry both. Ranger asked for a bag of holding in game after being with the group for a while already, as their new character was a potion maker and carried tons of bottles and such in game, where Iris told everyone they would have 1 magical item to start. Iris told Ranger they absolutely could not have a bag of holding. One session later, a new player was added to the group without Iris asking or informing anyone. Iris gave the new player a bag of holding, which Ranger found out in game when the new player offered to store all the party's junk in their new bag. I have a background that involved writing and altering legal contracts. I no longer perform these duties, but I remember a lot of it. Iris, upon finding this out, requested that I help them create a legally binding magical contract with airtight terms. This was their way of introducing a magic auction to the game, and I spent several hours writing a contract with them that covered all the bases and sounded sufficiently spooky enough. It wasn't a huge amount of effort, but I still feel a bit miffed that Iris decided not to ever use the contract again a few sessions later, when I pointed out logical and grammatical loopholes the party could potentially use to get out of the contract if they ever found the right patron to help them. As Iris had already put the contract in one of the campaigns they were running, instead of retconning it away, they drastically increased the price of all items in the auction to F over the player who signed the contract, making even simple costs more than our players were allowed to carry, and more than they ever found in the game combined. All the while, the player character had to permanently continue paying their auction subscription. I don't know where else to do this, so I'm gonna go ahead and say that Iris also insisted that their gold coins weighed 5 pounds each in game until we revolted against that. The second campaign I joined after Iris recruited me was an ongoing one set in the dark fairy tale inspired setting reminiscent of Curse of Strahd, in that nobody could leave the area as long as the big bad evil guy, Nelby, was alive. Undead? I don't know. The party member talked with Iris about their characters and subclasses prior to the start of the campaign. Iris did nothing to discourage or warn them from taking necrotic damage options as their main focuses, even encouraging one party member to play a necrotic-focused Dampier Warlock. Only in the second session of the campaign did Iris reveal that essentially every enemy in the entire campaign was immune or resistant to necrotic damage, as Nelby, her council, their soldiers, and just about everything else was undead. Iris did not allow takesy-backsies after revealing this. Iris did eventually allow the Barbarian, at the time a Phantom Rogue, to swap to a Blood Hunter subclass that was Warlockish after taking my character's grandma as a patron. There's a lot of context I need to add here, so please bear with me. By the time I joined the campaign, the party had defeated another party at the same level and allied with them in-game to take down the council. They had agreed to set out to find an associate of Bard's character to help them track down the Undead Destroyer.exe, a MacGuffin weapon that was the only thing that could permanently kill undead in this setting, supposedly. When I was invited to the game, I decided to make a reverse Red Riding Hood. Scarlet was raised by wolves who attacked an old lady at her cabin, only for the old lady to pull out a woodsman's axe and turn Scarlet into an orphan for the second time before adopting her. Grandma as a character could not have possibly existed before that session. The party had never heard of her because she did not exist. Scarlet wakes up to find Grandma gone, goes searching, and runs into the party who immediately latch onto this extremely dangerous axe-wielding child of destruction. Scarlet joins the party. They go to search for the Bard's associate. It's Grandma. Grandma and her second secret family is 600 miles away. Okay, Grandma forced the party to sign a magic contract saying that they won't ever try to hurt her in exchange for her helping the Barbarian with her backstory illness that wiped out his family. She then forced us to fight a supremely powerful angel that we only beat because Iris misread the character sheet and signed the contract. As Grandma goes to put Barbarian in a cocoon and change his class, she reveals that she caused his illness, the one that wiped out his family. Oh, and she then revealed she killed Ranger's entire village too, claiming the Ranger's backstory as well. Oh, and then Grandma revealed that Psychic's ex who killed everyone in her village, yes, this party was edgy, that was Grandma too. Grandma puppeteered everyone except Rogue's backstory to get them here in Zombieland to kill Nelby. Turns out this was a lie, but I'll save that for the final Iris story. Party can't Grandma anymore, so we F off, go to visit Bard's family after getting the MacGuffin, and Iris has completely changed his backstory too. Instead of the loving family Bard had written for himself, she now had an abusive alcoholic mother, a careless father, and a bunch of dead a-hole siblings. Because they got turned into zombies off screen. Yay! Iris said nothing short of a wish spell could undo this. As the final betrayal I'll bring up from that campaign, you know how I mentioned the party allied with an equally strong group of adventurers early on? We had to get Rogue's mother's heart to cure them of the curse. You would think two parties working together would make the fight against Vampire Mommy easier as a reward for managing to befriend a group of enemies the party was supposed to kill. Nope, Iris ruled the original version of the Vampire Mommy wasn't actually a good fight anymore, and made a custom CR40 monster that would fully automatically heal 3 times, gaining new attacks each time, could cast Power Word Kill, would summon a bunch of mobs automatically, and could take a free second turn as a mythical each round as our prize. They also automatically used a reaction to attack any healing characters mid-fight. On top of what I just described, they had about 15 other abilities and made a minimum of 5 attacks a turn, all on top of the fight having a time limit before the guard showed up to help her. Yay, we won. But I'm not proud of how much BS we had to do to claim that victory. Also included is a mention from the Rogue that at the start of his campaign, Rogue gave themselves a single friend in their backstory, their butler, who was unendingly loyal to her as well as being her father figure. This was a feature of her noble background. Iris killed the butler off in an off-screen cutscene in the second session. So I'm going to try to keep it short and sweet as there are 3 parts of Betrayal Mountain. But the recurring theme right here is just the fact that Iris seems to love the gacha. Now the problem with the gacha when it comes to storytelling is when it's good, done well, you know, it can be a twist that's very interesting that the whole party gets to enjoy. But Iris's brand of gacha is, hey, remember that thing I told you wasn't going to be true 100%, I triple promise? It's the opposite of that. I'm really smart, right? Tricked you guys. And, you know, maybe once, if it's like a really funny payoff, it could work. But every session, it seems like Iris is like, do this thing, and then they punish you, and then point and laugh at you and say, haha, you're stupid. How could you ever thought that thing was a good idea? It's a sign of someone who thinks they're very intelligent. But the thing about intelligence is, if you're withholding knowledge and actively misleading people, you can have someone who's a genius, and they're not going to know half the stuff that you know, because honestly, why would they? How would they? And what's the point of them figuring it out anyways if you're just going to change it behind the scenes or retcon it again? Because Iris seems guilty of that too. I think the perfect example is a simulacrum situation where she basically twists the party into taking the action she wants, which is to try to assassinate the council member. And clearly the payoff is that he made an evil clone, and that's going to be a really cool reveal. But it really isn't a cool reveal because what happened is you killed off the character, replaced them with the identical character, let them think it'll be a betrayal arc for them, and then you double betrayed them because you're so smart, I guess. Anyways, let's just jump right into part 2. The first campaign after I joined the group opened in a pretty magnificent manner. The party was forced together to confront the reality of a giant robot man who wanted to inflict the AI socialist revolution upon the world. Honestly, nice opening, Iris. The relevant characters here are my cleric, the changeling rogue, and psychic. Before the start of the campaign, Iris and psychic and rogue all had agreed to the idea of building together an in-character romance between the latter two. By the end of session 2, everyone but Iris realized that the plan was dead as Rogue hated Psychic and Psychic wasn't particularly fond of Rogue. Sometimes characters come out differently in-game than they do on paper. Oh well. Cut to a few sessions later, my cleric and rogue had a nice little side moment after we were pulled together into a private call where my character, who was a doctor, figured out that rogue was a changeling. Honestly, the reveal was a little forced by Iris, but I did have a nice moment where my cleric and rogue walked away trusting each other a bit more, and rogue was even smiling. I thought it'd be funny if Iris mentioned that rogue comes back looking satisfied and more relaxed around my cleric after the call, but Iris ixnayed that because they were still hoping their rogue psychic ship would sail. No huge loss, but that ship was already chilling with Poseidon. 4 sessions into the campaign, the party encountered a soldier who was acting strangely and attacked the party out of nowhere, lunging forward and getting violent. We were forced to fight back to protect ourselves and managed to stun him long enough to knock him out and tie him up. My character examined him using a disease-finding spell, and we found out he was infected with the new fungal zombie disease. Neat. The first arc of the campaign was shaping up to be the spread of this sapient zombie disease. A bit of roleplay happens, the party gets surrounded by soldiers who check to make sure they aren't sick, and my character, who's dressed as a nobleman, is interrogated by the soldiers. Honestly, once again props to Iris up to this point. I feel like I should explain my character at this point. My character was a humanoid doll made by a noble in the distant past to give his sickly daughter, who few people would willingly approach. Her purpose was to protect and care for this child, Reyna. Reyna led Eska around everywhere, they were never separated, and with the innocence of a child, Reyna started forcing Eska to make decisions. What's your favorite flower? Which book is your favorite? Do you like this one or this one better? Reyna always forced the doll to make a choice, and gradually over time, this caused the doll to come to life, growing a soul. Without spelling out the intermediary backstory, eventually the doll cured Reyna, and Reyna grew to become an adult and fall in love with an inventor. The inventor's name was Cecil. The giant robot I mentioned earlier, that was Cecil, or rather what was left of him. Cecil knew everything about the doll Eska. He knew she was intelligent, did not need to rest, and was the most skilled medic in the history of the kingdom, knowing more about medicine than literally anyone else. Cecil was shaping up to be a major big bad evil guy who wanted to eliminate work in the country in exchange for nearly all metal resources, had created an entire army of robots and led them far to the north, but not before leaving Eska with a ring that would allow them to talk to each other for 10 minutes a week. Knowing Cecil will definitely want to do something about the new zombie fungus plague that is just being revealed, I had Eska contact Cecil. Eska was going to travel to the capital and begin to work on a cure. She had already had samples, and I'd rolled extremely high on my medicine checks to figure out the basis of a fungal vaccine, with Iris telling me Eska 100% had the know-how to make a cure. Eska asked that Cecil be prepared to distribute the cure once she was done making it, and give her at least a week before taking any actions. Iris said that Cecil agreed. Once again, I would like to mention that Cecil knows Eska is essentially built for this, and he's 1,000 miles north of the capital and can't teleport anyways, right? Fast forward 3 days in the game, one session since we fought the knight, we arrive at the capital to find the entirety of Cecil's robot army and Cecil himself at the gate. Somehow they all ran across several rivers straight south around 1,000 miles in the time it took us to travel a little over 100 miles. We arrived just in time to see Cecil blow up the city wall of the capital and send his army in. He turns to Eska. "Why didn't you wait?" I asked. "You were told to wait. You agreed." "You were taking too long. I will take the resources in the castle and make the cure and distribute it," the giant robot replies. "You don't even know anything about medicine. Why wouldn't you wait? You know I could have accomplished this. Humanity couldn't wait that long. I will brute force a cure, even though it'll take far more resources, blah 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 blah." Cecil went on a nonsensical monologue and then raised his enormous adamantine hand. "Now turn around and leave. There's nothing I can do to you which will not kill you, Eska." Iris reminded me that Cecil, who was essentially a souped-up adamantine golem, did tons of thunder and force damage. I had wanted to give my porcelain doll cleric a bludgeoning weakness, and Iris had initially agreed to that, but around the time Iris made Cecil's boss sheet, they immediately insisted that they wouldn't allow the bludgeoning weakness and take force and thunder as weaknesses instead. What a complete and total coincidence. Unable to talk any sense into Cecil, Eska gave up, withdrew from the lines, and watched Cecil get his ass kicked regardless, fleeing from the city as various adventurers fought him off, meaning he did this attack with no results. Well, there was one result. Soldiers saw Eska trying to talk Cecil down, and so they arrested the entire party. Eska was forced to reveal her entire backstory to an NPC in a mini-chat, and the NPCs agreed to not share her story for about 5 minutes. The party gets dragged in front of the Queen and her council, which is apparently just one of exactly 6 groups in the entire country-wide Adventurers Guild. Iris kept making the numbers smaller and smaller as the campaign went on. We had no clue on why other than realism, and we get our first big shock as we find that Rogue is on the council. Oh wait, that's not Rogue, just the original person Rogue had been copying as her changeling form this whole time. It turns out the adventuring party on the council had saved Rogue in their backstory and allowed them to transform into one of them to keep them safe from the people hunting them. And this same adventurer who suggested this didn't warn Rogue or give them a chance to cover up before being dragged into the council. Iris had the Queen go on and on about impersonating a royal advisor and treason and dungeon, etc., before role-playing with them for a bit about how it's actually okay because the adventurers said it was. This was really just Iris's way of forcing Rogue to reveal them being a changeling to the party. No way to avoid it, no warnings. Kind of annoying, but at least that's all Iris revealed, right? No. Please recall that my character Eska was a cleric doll who looked like a human. Cecil had kidnapped her centuries before and locked her away, studying her and learning to make more intelligent constructs like he had in his army. Behold that, Eska's entire existence was a secret of her family. She didn't look like a doll, act like one, anything. Only someone who had met her before would know who she was. Well, guess who Iris made the queen? Yeah, it was Reyna's great-great-great-great-granddaughter who owned a painting of Eska and shouted out who she was, minus the doll part, immediately as Eska walked into the room. So yeah, that was fun. Roleplay, roleplay, roleplay. The only reason the adventurers who Eska had spilled the beans to didn't say what Eska was to the whole group was because I begged Iris not to in our private call, as Eska's entire character arc was supposed to be her slowly opening up to the party as they got more and more hints that she wasn't human. When I say hints, I mean I went nuts on this. I had art commissioned of Eska's face cracking and her hiding it with her hand if she ever got crit. I had a family portrait made that would be included both as a painting in her old home in-game and in a book about her family that was supposed to be rare and existing somewhere in the setting. I've been dropping hints that she only ever drank, never ate in front of the party. They would have been able to follow her to find out she was disposing of food they gave her, and that she was only pretending to drink. She wore gloves and never let anyone touch her or try to pick her up because of how hard and heavy she was. This is just the smallest list of what I had prepped, all of which Iris knowing and agreeing to this being her character arc, to dropping very small hints and seeing if anyone could figure it out. Iris and I even agreed that once she began warming to the party, she would pursue her actual goal, defying Reyna's shield and sword, and then finally her grave. What happened instead? Iris had the party confront Eska, basically forcing them out of character to corner her and interrogate her into confessing who she was. Eska had never told a lie, and so I carefully had her maneuver around her being a doll, instead making it seem like her relationship with the queen was a big secret she was keeping. The session ended there, with me upset but okay. And then Iris changed their mind. I received a message telling me that if Eska didn't tell the party she was a doll, the party wouldn't get their level up. I said no. Then Iris said out loud, "If this doesn't happen, there won't be a level up. Everyone wait." I kinda sat there for a moment, grieving for what I was about to do, and gave in. Iris, all proud of herself, said, "You all feel as if Eska is still hiding something." And so when the next person pressed, I had Eska admit everything. All my secrets out the window, Iris was proud of herself and just sat there wondering how I could keep playing my character who I love so much. Iris then pulled me into a mini session where the queen showed Eska Reyna's grave and a message that she had left for Eska. I was heartbroken. Her secrets, the art I made, her goal, all done with. 5 sessions into the campaign, I realized I couldn't play her anymore. I went to Iris and asked if Eska could become an NPC. I'd make a new character with new goals and a plotline that wasn't important enough that Iris could ruin it. Iris approved the change. Eska did the roles to make the cure for the plague, became an NPC that lived at the castle, and I brought in my dum-dum shorty. I hoped that all the party could stay in touch with Eska, but other than allowing her to show up once to give a flower as a gift and cast Gentle Repose, see the Not So Gentle Repose post, Iris didn't allow Eska to show up ever again, stating that the party would rely on her to solve all their problems. This was set on a meta level anytime a party member in-game talked about wanting to go see Eska, even if they didn't have any problems. As for Cecil, Iris's justification for Cecil not listening to her, betraying her again, and somehow running 1,000 miles in 2 nights? He cracked his soul when he put it in the robot, so he couldn't make smart decisions anymore. I had been led to believe that Cecil was a big bad evil guy we could negotiate with, but he was just another trap, another way for Iris to show how superior they were to all our plans and ideas. Side note, Rogue told me as we were typing this out that they think one of the reasons that Iris might have spilled the beans on Eska and forced everything to happen like this was that because Iris might have been jealous at how many theories Rogue was making about Eska and that she wasn't paying as much attention to Iris's cool NPCs and villains. I had put a lot of effort in making Eska come across as cold and aloof, even though she really wanted to be cared for and was taking care of the party from the background. Iris might not have taken it well that I kinda convinced Rogue that Eska was secretly evil. Who can say for sure though? In between the session, those forced reveals happened and the next thing I realized, I could no longer play my cleric. She had been given the goal of her arc, had all her secrets forcibly revealed, and in general was in a sour mood when I thought about playing her next session. She'd been given everything she could reasonably want, so there was no reason for her to stay in the party. With a heavy heart, I retired my cleric and brought in a revamped version of an old character of mine, with Iris's permission of course. Enter Parm, the idiot supreme cinnamon roll divine soul who angered an angel in the previous post. Iris had been hyping up that one of the party members would take a feat to learn how to enchant in-game, if they had in-game reasons for doing so, thus providing the party with a persistent source of upgrading, as Iris didn't like having magical items as rewards or loot. I wish to stress this, that the enchanting feat was Iris's idea, not something any of us asked for. Instead of having my cleric take the feat as originally intended, when I swapped to my idiot supreme, it was agreed that she had already been in the city for several months learning enchanting from the master enchanter and a fake lich Indigo. Iris waited until after I had taken the feat under the agreement that there was no take-backsies to reveal that it wasn't enough to have already learned how to enchant and have resources and time to do so. My character needed to spend an immense amount of time studying mid-game to make even common items. Obviously, enchanting isn't really a built-in thing as a skill in D&D, so I figured it was well worth it to have a large amount of gold in 2 to 3 days to make a common magical item, with the length of time and resource exponentially growing by rarity. What I was not prepared for was Iris informing me my character would have to buy extremely expensive books of various arbitrary categories, and then study to learn to make even the simplest magic item. So if there was 13 categories of books with 5 rarities each, I might have had to dedicate 50 gold and 7 days of in-game studying just to learn how to make a cloak of billowing. That is assuming that Iris doesn't randomly decide that the cloak actually falls under multiple types of magic, therefore requiring even more study and gold. This was a campaign where 10 gold was a lot of money. I wish I still had the full requirements written down because they were truly ridiculous. By the time we got around to gaining the capability of making exactly one uncommon magic item, my character would have needed to invest hundreds of gold, dozens of days of study, and an entire feat. Oh, and this was all while she could only hold 3 books at a time in her inventory, even with her bag of holding, because 5 books takes up the same amount of space as a large barrel according to Iris. Learning how to make and actually making a rare item in game could easily take up to half a year. Did I mention the final ingredient of studying or enchanting was that Iris said that if we were traveling, my character could not spend any time studying or crafting without losing the ability to join in roleplay. This is a roleplay heavy group. Iris literally wanted me to give up roleplay to use the feat they gave me, and they didn't tell me that until after I took the feat. When I protested, they agreed I could roleplay a little bit, but they also increased all crafting and studying times, no takesy-backsies. I feel like this is also a good spot to add in that Iris often tried to rule that our character couldn't get a short rest if they roleplayed, because Iris considered literally anything other than sitting still in silence to be heavy activity. So that fake lich I mentioned earlier, Indigo was a lich that didn't want to be one anymore, but he ran his shop pretending to be a spooky fake lich cosplayer as a kind of a theme. He and Parm were established to be good friends, and Indigo was one who made the Raised Dead scroll from a previous story. We couldn't afford to pay for the scroll outright, so Indigo agreed to exchange the scroll for getting to study Rogue's Spell Thief's abilities for 14 days. This amount of time was supposed to be a pretty good fit since Rogue was about to miss 2 weeks worth of sessions on a vacation. Iris claimed what happened next was a result of them changing their plans because we liked Indigo too much. I'm not convinced that's true, as Iris lied to us constantly in and out of game. Indigo led the rogue to his shop with the promises she'd be back in 2 weeks. Cut to a scene in Indigo's shop, and Lich Friend ties Rogue to a table and announces he's selling her to Cecil. Yes, the Cecil from above. We never learned the point of this. Indigo casts the spell Flawed Simulacrum, a custom version of the spell Iris came up with for reasons that we never fully understood because they didn't make any sense, and made a fake rogue who he sent back to the party. This was obviously suspicious because the 2 weeks weren't up, and last we checked, Rogue didn't talk like an 80s skateboarder. It was bizarre and kind of funny. We figure out what is going on just in time for Indigo to show up at the door. Indigo has come to check on us and make sure everything is good, and is like, WTF is wrong with the rogue? Yeah, so Indigo and the party talk and figure out one of his flawed simulacrums, he had 12, had gone rogue. No pun intended. So the party destroyed the fake rogue and goes to confront the simulacrum. Along the way, Iris roleplays as Indigo and keeps messing up the voice for Indigo and stops and out of character says, sorry guys, I can't get his accent right tonight. We get to Indigo's shop, there's like 8 constructs inside, we kick their asses. Although I do want to know that Iris claimed this itty bitty shop was too large for my character to hit a person halfway across the room with a spell within a range of 120 feet. Nothing major, just a reminder that Iris doesn't know distances. We take down the constructs and head to the back room where Indigo promptly turns around and smashes the panel on the wall that allows anyone to exit, as it turns out this is a pocket dimension. Indigo goes on a rant about how he already sold Rogue and now we're going to die. We beat his ass without using proper attacks in an honestly hilarious moment as everyone refuses to treat this lich as a proper foe, biting, punching, and smacking with sticks. until he turned to snow because surprise, yeah, that was a simulacrum too. Iris announces we are locked in and it will take like 3 days of work for my enchanter to fix the panel. Barbarian, bless his soul, attempted percussive maintenance on the panel, smashing with a hand. Things rapidly go downhill from there. I'll spare you the worst of it, but Iris declared we were trapped into this featureless, brightly lit room with nothing in it for 14 days, before the real Indigo showed up to save us. Unfortunately, this triggered a panic attack out of me IRL as suppressed memories of being locked in rooms for long periods of time resurfaced. I eventually recovered from this, but the idea of our characters only surviving off Ranger's good berries and being completely helpless in a featureless environment was awful. Iris claimed this was a special way of making us time skip 14 in-game days before we could try to go rescue Rogue. Also, Iris mocked us for not realizing the simulacrum Indigo was fake. I kept changing accents as a hint. Never mind that they told us out of character they couldn't keep their accents straight. Long story short, my panic attack and people protesting the 14 days of confinement led to a retcon where we instead twiddled our thumbs at home until real Indigo came and told us, uh-oh, my simulacrum sold Rogue, go save them. Iris's justification for the whole simulacrum thing was that Indigo was evil the whole time, and they retconned it because we liked the character. I can't help but think, why did you let my character spend 8 months with them then, when she's really good at getting to know people? I don't know. Later on, Iris tried to basically put us in a situation where Indigo would refuse to ever help the party again, and would even refuse to help my character again if they didn't leave the party because Rogue asked for compensation for Indigo's simulacrum having sold them. In a previous post, I mentioned an incel character who Rogue cannot stand hearing about even to this day. It is my sad, heartbroken, and disappointed place to tell you that I technically created the character, or at least the original version of him. I am currently running my first Dungeons & Dragons campaign. It had been going extremely well if we go by player feedback. The campaign is actually based off a video game I'd hoped to make around a decade ago, but gave up on because coding is hard and I'm lazy. This game was going to feature several playable queer characters and a lot of choices. At the time I was writing it, there was a lot of people lashing out at wokeness in games, so I decided to make a second version of the game. This version would have all the queer characters, strong women, and progressiveness taken out and would be distributed freely as an apology. What I wasn't going to tell anyone until after launch was that not only did it take the final boss out of the game, it pretty much only left muscly men. Enter Chet Manley. Chet was going to be the only protagonist of this wokeless version of the game, and was basically going to be a super supportive, awesome bro type guy. And his version of the game was going to be extremely unintentionally homoerotic, as he went around surrounded by nothing but supportive, muscular, and sometimes shirtless men. It was basically my version of a joke. I told Iris about this version of the scrapped game when I was converting to the story to be used as a D&D campaign. Unfortunately, I think Iris didn't hear all the supportive friendly bits of the character. Instead, a couple of sessions later, my character shows up in Iris's campaign after joining the Adventurers Guild and finds an absolute ass outside of their front door. Iris had asked if they could use Chet as a reference in their own campaign. What Iris didn't tell me was that they were going to make him an insufferable, harassing, sexist incel of a reporter who Iris would use in-game to stalk and harass the character of the player they had a crush on. Ranger nearly shot the dude, and I don't blame her. He even tried to break into the gay bar mentioned in a previous post to continue harassing the female-presenting party members. I feel like I need to stop writing anything more about Chet at this point because Rogue is considering strangling me. He only showed up for a while, but he is seared into our collective consciousness. I will never be able to use him in anything ever. Thanks, Iris. As an aside, this isn't the only incel character Iris added to the campaign of theirs, and every time one showed up, Iris would giggle maniacally out of character at our frustration and disdain towards the characters. At one point, Iris created a literally immortal incel that kept reviving with more power and following the party as punishment for killing him earlier on. We only managed to permanently, we think, put him down by dealing a finishing blow with a very specific magical item. Rogue will cover more of these characters in their upcoming posts. TLDR, DM hates when player has interesting secrets, characters, roleplay, or lives. Forces reveal of all their characters' secrets because their secrets are cooler. Adds an enchanting feat to the game and punishes players for taking feat. DM locks PC in a room for 14 days so they can have a time skip. DM turns wholesome character into incel. Alright, and that concludes the second part of the story. I feel like this part of the series has really just become, how many times can Iris say I gotcha and then smile smugly at how well she did? The simulacrum stuff was ridiculous. Having a character like Indigo that has a distinct accent and then using audio cues to try to signal that he's a simulacrum while telling people out of character continuously that, hey, I can't do the voice right today, sorry guys. As someone who's DM'd and has characters with distinct voices, there are times you're going to be off your game. And if you're going to lie out a character and say, guys, can you just please go along with it? I'm trying to do the voice like it's Indigo. It's kind of ridiculous for someone to do that and make it a gotcha. Because again, doesn't matter how smart the person is, doesn't matter what they roll, Iris is going to retcon it and use out-of-game lies to force in-game scenarios, which is super weird to do. One of the worst things you can do in Dungeons & Dragons is betray the trust of your players in real life just to get a few story plots pushed forward. That's ridiculous. All you've established is that you're a liar, and if you're willing to lie for something as dumb as D&D, you're definitely going to lie when you're getting called out on your other bullshit. Obviously, as a Dungeon Master, sometimes you want to keep people in the dark for a narrative reason. Like maybe you don't want to have the big bad evil guy's full plan be revealed, or maybe you don't want to tell a player out of game who the spy is in some kind of adventuring guild they're a part of, because that would really ruin the next few sessions. What you can do is just be honest and say, hey, you guys will find out soon enough. I'm really excited. I put a lot of work into it, and you call it a day. What Iris would do apparently is lie to their face, swear that they're telling the truth for like 4 straight hours. And then next session, they do a 180 and say, ha, you're stupid. You believe that? Yeah, no, you believed your friend. They're not stupid, Iris. All right, let's move on to part 3. And sorry if there's a little bit of a vocal shift, as this is being recorded over a couple days just because of the length of it. Hey there you all, today is finally time to crest the peak of Betrayal Mountain. Thus far, most of the betrayals that I've typed out have been in-game. The ones I've saved for this last entry are the ones that hurt on a more personal level, as they're mostly out of game. Some of these only 1 or 2 people witnessed, some of them we were all there for. Buckle up, thanks for reading, and please learn these red flags so you can never pull a stupid like we did. Starting small, I've noticed that I started my first campaign while I was still playing with Iris. I've covered most of this, but I'd like to expand on it quite a bit, as I feel the context helps explain why I stayed with Iris for so long. My first game didn't actually start out as a full game, but rather a one-shot that I based off a setting I made a long time ago, just to test the waters of being a dungeon master. I was rather afraid I'd misuse the power people trust DMs with, as up to this point I thought Iris was the only good dungeon master I've ever had. Everyone was really encouraging though, with the one-shot taking place in a woodland library as the party tried to find a missing noble. The setup was pretty simple, but to rush through it, there was a series of breadcrumbs and NPCs that all pointed to a specific item in the library as being dangerous, and one of the players were trying to subtly guide the rest of the party into messing with the item, despite the clear danger. Iris decided not to participate, stating that they'd have control issues with not being in complete control of the world they play in. The people who actually played in the one-shot actually seemed to love the outcome of the session, even though they all messed with an item, which actually almost led to a character dying. I was worried that it wasn't that great until one of the first things out of the player's mouths was the "one is the next session." It made me really happy that people liked it so much, and that I hadn't messed it up. Instead of being happy for me, however, when I told Iris how it went, and that I'd be prepping a continuation of the story, Iris told me that what I'd done letting one player have extra knowledge and be built-in traitor was really screwed up, and that they'd have been pissed if they'd been one of my players. I pointed out that this was just a test one-shot, and everyone seemed to like how it ended, and Iris kind of dropped it, but every now and again would bring it up on how they hated that I'd done such a thing in any game. The character who betrayed the party was pretty much there to add a wildcard element and to help point the players towards the choices they could make in the game, and never force anyone to do anything. In fact, that character is now an NPC in the setting that the players seem to really get a kick out of. Memorable, you know? Anyways, I got to make a second session and Iris asked if they can join. At the time, I really looked up to Iris as a DM because I was under the impression that they knew what they were doing. The horror stories hadn't really sunk in yet, as silly as that might seem. So of course I said yes, please make a serious character. Iris came back with a character that technically fit all the requirements. Level 6, simple backstory, reason to be in the library, but he was also basically the uber nerd with a stereotypical lisp. In the mini, I did bring Iris up to speed and gave them a feel for the setting and a chance to give me advice. They had their bard harass the attendant assigned to them within the library. Not in a creepy way to be clear, but more like making her life miserable. I probably should have stopped Iris then, but when I pointed out that I asked them to make a serious character, they just said, "He is serious. Don't worry, he'll be fine in session," and I accepted that. Once again, not my brightest moment, but I looked up to Iris when it comes to D&D. Session 2 of what was now a 3-shot rolls around and Iris' character joins the party. Within a couple minutes of joining the party to help them solve mysteries and go talk to the librarian, Iris had their character, who I'm going to call Bob, assert simply they knew things without asking me several times and tried to prompt several rolls in the middle of someone else's talking before Bob kind of just started annoying Rogue's character. Iris had a crush on Rogue out of character, but had never had a chance to poke at them with an actual player character. It wasn't the worst thing ever, but it was pretty awkward. Between the lists, Bob insisting on following Rogue around, interruptions, and constant assertions of knowledge that mood strained pretty fast, Iris tried to interrupt Barbarian during an important moment to talk to Rogue several times, and I told Iris, "Hold on a moment, Iris, Barbarian is saying something important. We'll get to you in a second." Iris responded to what I thought was a gentle correction by muting and then leaving the call. A few moments later, I got a message from Iris saying that they were sorry. It was their first time trying to be a player character in like 10 years and they were embarrassed. This apology made sense to me. We all get a little too excited sometimes, so I moved on and the rest of the session was pretty great according to my players. I was going to put something self-deprecating here, but they got onto me, lol. Ranger thinks Iris might have actually been rage quitting in that moment, but as neither of us can read their mind in the past, I chose to be charitable. Ranger had been playing with Iris longer and had no such sympathy. Fast forward several sessions and the one-shot has morphed into a full campaign. We've expanded everyone's backstory, the world lore has been presented, and the party is getting ready to set out on their quest. Iris messages me and asks if they can give it another go as a player. I'm of course excited and say sure, but this time we build the character together and time into the world so that Iris doesn't feel like they have to fall back on a stereotype nerd character. We make a paladin, do what I think was actually a pretty great roleplay exploring Paladin's history, and Paladin even has an introduction mini where he meets half the party. Honestly, it was all shaping up to be pretty good. Iris had made a solid character with a solid story and even a small bit of tension with Rogue from the start. The night of the Paladin's intro comes and about 30 minutes before session, Iris messages me to tell me they're dropping. They couldn't handle the stress of not being in control of the world they were playing in. Rogue thinks it might have something to do with the extremely light, built-in tension with their character, but we can't say for sure. So I quickly rework some stuff and the party ends up with a mostly silent barbarian to journey with them. Side note, I don't know why, but they adore this barbarian way too much. We thought we couldn't hear anything more from Iris that night, but then about an hour into the session they joined the call, and then they hung up, and then they joined it again. This repeated quite a few times. I'm guessing they were checking in if we were having fun without them, but I'm not sure. What definitely was happening was that they started making random sounds when they joined the call before immediately hanging up again. Honestly, their interaction was probably when I started to view Iris as a middle schooler despite being in their mid-20s. Between the hopping in and out and Iris sending tons of random memes to the group chat through the entirety of the session, the other players were starting to get super irritated. Iris even started responding to every single post any player made in the channel we track loot, party inventory, and lore tidbits with, "Oh, this is going to be the big bad evil guy." Eventually, we get through the session and the players are having fun but are also irritated at Iris's behavior. Iris spammed up, "Are you all done yet?" And when I responded that we were, they hopped in call, and I would like to emphasize again that I really looked up to this person as a DM and was excited and hopeful to get their approval during table talk. Instead of wanting to talk about the session that just happened though, Iris launched into essentially a lecture about their own games. They only wanted to talk about what they were going to do in their next session, repeatedly told people to vote right now on the new post they had made, and essentially allowed no room for anyone to talk about the session. I was a lot less confident at the time, and I was used to being kind of walked over, but I found out later that most of the other players were absolutely pissed about this. When I talked to Iris later, maybe giving people time to breathe and do table talk for my games, they told me that if I wanted that kind of privacy, I'd have to make a new server for my campaign. So that's what we did, with Iris making me promise we wouldn't talk about them in the new server. Ranger wanted me to mention here that even after making this new server, Iris would tag people in their D&D server and post memes throughout most of the session when campaign was running. Some people decided to mute the server because of this. It was around that time that Iris began searching for a new person to roleplay with on session night so they wouldn't feel left out. This will come back later. Nicer little tangent here, Iris had a tendency to add new players, kick players, add new campaigns, delete campaigns, make new servers, and then delete new servers. When I type it out like that, it sounds awful, but we were having enough fun for everyone that it seemed justifiable. When Iris recruited me to their campaign, they recruited another player at the same time. That player didn't make it to the first session, and I was under the impression they dropped out, but later I found out Iris had kicked them in the week leading up to the session because he wasn't active enough. It gave me a bad feeling. I didn't recognize this as a red flag at the time, but I probably should have. Within the next 6 months, Iris kicked I think 9 or 10 players, some for valid reason, more for less valid. Ranger is informing me that Iris's longest lasting campaign had a total of 21 players come and go in less than a year. Iris would make a new campaign and a new server to go with it, although most of that happened before I joined the group. Whenever Iris canceled or ended a campaign, they would delete the server without warning and without giving people a chance to save anything, often without telling people the campaign was canceled. At one point, Psychic woke up to find the server gone and they thought they'd been kicked from the group. A little after I was brought into the group, Ranger laid down an ultimatum that if Iris deleted one more server without warning, Ranger would not join the next one. This saved us from the server hopping thankfully, and they never deleted one while I was with them. Unfortunately, this didn't stop Iris from deleting campaigns or Roll20 campaigns. Honestly, I could probably make a post just on the delete campaigns, but I don't have the energy for that. To break it down, in 6 months, Iris canceled 12 campaigns, although to be fair, only about 6 of those got off the ground. The main campaign I joined for didn't get canceled until right before I left the group, so it seemed more stable than it was. While I'm talking about canceled campaigns, I should probably come clean and admit I completely failed repeatedly to learn the lesson of don't help Iris world build, as I helped Iris make entire cultures, settings, maps, and scenarios for each of these. In fact, if I'm being blunt, I probably did most of the work and I was stupid for not stopping. Lesson learned. At one point, Iris and I made a test campaign with a bunch of test characters. We put a lot of work into making these test characters, and I was really proud of one in particular. It was purely mechanical stuff, nothing to be emotionally invested in, but Iris told me one day that they wanted to delete the campaign. I messaged them, okay, just hold on until I save the sheets later today. Iris said okay, and then when I got home, the campaign and all the sheets were deleted. Iris blamed me for this with, you know I have to delete things. You should have saved them earlier. I don't have any more to add on to that. I was just kind of flabbergasted. Iris would even send a message to give us information and then immediately delete it. And I had to ask them to stop because clearly not everyone is online 24/7. They were missing things. Some of us had a discussion later with everything Iris showed us, and it seems the main reason they were obsessed with deleting things was a combination of housekeeping and not wanting to leave any records. Iris would get pissed if other people deleted or edited things they posted. We didn't see the red flag and we really should have. I don't have a single positive thing to say about what I'm about to type out, so we are going to keep this one short and bitter. Iris kept people's initial messages inquiring about joining the group in response to their looking for group posts. For one of our players, Iris bullied the player a bit by apparently telling them repeatedly it was the weirdest message they've ever gotten. The player read to me once, and while I don't remember the exact details, it seemed pretty normal. Iris also kept Psychic's first message and showed it to many other players as what to not do in a D&D application while mentioning Psychic by name. I know this because Iris told me themselves. Earlier on, I mentioned that because Iris was feeling left out during my campaign, as they had nobody to talk to outside of the group, they decided to find some new people to roleplay with on my campaign nights. I don't have a good way to put this, so here we go. We had earlier on asked Iris not to add anyone into the group who was not an adult. Apparently, we were not specific enough because they added in a player who just turned 17 and did not tell us until after they started playing. It was incredibly uncomfortable and we told Iris not to do it again. They asked for a specific age and we said they need to be already over 18. I didn't think we needed to say even higher. A few weeks later, Iris told us that they found a new person to roleplay with on game night and that they were hoping to bring her into the group at some point. Iris said it would be a few months before they could officially join. I, with the others backing, had asked Iris not to add any new players without us getting to meet them first, as up to this point, players were added at random, and so Iris wanted us to meet this girl in a private call so we could get to know her before Iris added her to the group. It was during this call that one of us asked us how old this girl was because she sounded young. 17, I'll be 18 in a month. Iris jumped in with, I'll just roleplay with her in private until she's old enough. I feel bad for this kid for the conversation that happened next, as we made it clear to Iris in no uncertain terms that this was not acceptable. I really don't think I need to explain why this was creepy as F, which is good because I don't think I have the words for it. We apologized to the girl and started a new call without her, and went through with Iris that this creepy behavior wasn't it. Iris asked us if 18 isn't old enough. How old do players have to be to join us? Because they get along with people younger than them, and they blamed their autism for misunderstanding. Long story short, we made Iris promise to make all recruiting posts 20 or older from now on, and not to roleplay with teenagers in private. And now we reach the peak of Betrayal Mountain, and I'm not gonna lie, this one is personal. Remember how I said that Iris liked kicking people from groups? Some of those were super valid, but one person they wanted to kick was because they missed a couple of sessions to try and take care of their mental health. Iris confided in me in a private call that they had been wanting to kick Ranger, who had been in the group the longest, from the group for a while because of the sessions she had missed. Ranger was beloved by everyone in the group, and I tried to explain to Iris that kicking her was unnecessary and offered alternatives. I suggested talking to Ranger, or maybe asking her to take a hiatus until she felt better. We could even have her character go do a secret mission or something. At the very least, Iris shouldn't just kick Ranger without talking to her. I must have spent a good hour or two talking to Iris before they gave in and agreed to not kick Ranger. A few months later, Ranger is still with the group and not missing sessions anymore. Things were going okay, honestly. We were sharing stories, and one involving one of Ranger's characters came up, and Iris decided to share the following. Ranger is so lucky she's still in the group. OP tried to convince me to kick her a few months back because she was missing so many sessions, and I had to talk her down. It was precisely that moment that I checked out from trying to help Iris in any way. The group departed from Iris less than a month later, but that's a story for the next and final post, where I will write about why Iris is called Iris, how we tried to fix things, and how the group is doing now. Thank you for reading our incredibly long vent. TLDR, our former Dungeon Master discouraged me when I first launched my first game, trying to make my game about them. DM tried to add minors to our roleplay group multiple times, and mocked other players to the group before lying and blaming their desire to kick someone on me in public. So after reading the rest of Betrayal Mountain, I actually think that there is a good takeaway from this. You see, the original writer of the story, Blue Vieira, they do a really good job of ironing out all the red flags, and they do a really good job showing that how they as a DM are already doing better than Iris did. And yeah, it's unfortunate that they didn't realize that Iris was such a bad DM, but it's one of those things where you learn from two types of people. You can learn from the absolute best people that you want to emulate, and then there's the people who you want to run in the opposite direction of and do the exact opposite of. And Iris definitely trained you well when it comes to doing the opposite of what she does. Because as we go down the list of stories, you helped Iris be a little bit of a world builder. And although she ended up scrapping that, that's always stuff you can repurpose yourself. And once you got into the flow of it, once you got comfortable with it, and it sounded like you got proud of it too, that's a skill set that's going to make you a great DM. And I can say right now that you already have better mitigation skills, better team management skills than Iris does. So I'm sure you'll continue to do fantastic as, the years go by and you have more experience under your belt. Confidence is a very important thing when it comes to being a DM, and now that you're outside of the shadow of Iris, it seems like you've only gotten more and more confident. Now, I did promise an epilogue at the end of the story, and I like that it's from two different perspectives. The first one is going to be by Majestic, and it's going to be called The Eye of the Storm. And this will be the first time we're doing a reading from the rogue's perspective, although their input definitely was in all these previous stories, as the original writer shouted out. This is the first time we're going to see their point of view, spoken in their own words. Hey, this is the player known as Rogue in all these Iris stories. This one is going to be a bit more emotional than Blue's posts, and will also show how vulnerable I was when this happened. So things started getting funky when Iris and I first met. During my interview to get into the game, we talked for about 2 hours when they began to flirt with me. It was weird and I felt uncomfortable, but I unfortunately flirted back because I mimic behavior when I'm feeling uncomfortable. When I jokingly said the line, "What, you already have a crush on me?" I was joking, having a goof. Iris became upset and made a rigid boundary for me to never flirt with them again, because they were uncomfortable and didn't want it to happen. To make it clear, I'm okay with the boundary that was set. I never wanted any flirting to begin with. Iris would later break this rule themselves, but that's a later problem. So when I first joined Iris's campaign, I'd like to say it was fine, but it wasn't really. The first campaign Iris included me in had a Sky City and a mutant zombie apocalypse, as did many of their future games. Iris made the latter half of that first session about my character and her mother, revealing a significant plot event during her introduction. I felt guilty because Iris became upset that they had revealed the plot too early, and now they were worried that we would ruin the story and speedrun the final boss, even though it was their own decision to make the reveal. In reality, it wasn't a huge deal because we already knew we were too under-leveled to fight such a strong boss, but Iris's complaints made me feel guilty. I also felt guilty for standing up to Iris later at one point in time. At one point, Iris was my only friend. I was very lonely and having a rough time at the cusp of adulthood. I wasn't close to anyone else, so standing up to them and putting my foot down rocked the boat a little. You see, Iris had a nasty habit of kicking out players, and in the Sky City campaign, they kicked out a player for a stupid reason. Juggernaut left their mic for about a minute to grab their dinner from the table. I told Iris that was unfair and they got annoyed at me. Although they did not snap at me, they did realize I was right and eventually apologized to Juggernaut, but did not let them back into the game because it would be too embarrassing. As mentioned before, it was incredibly lonely, so I let Iris get away with a lot of stuff. I was desperate for friends. I didn't want Iris to kick me out of the group as I started to get closer to everyone in the group. Over time, Iris's attitude worsened and they began getting annoyed whenever I disagreed with them. They would snap at me. "You're wrong, you don't know what you're talking about, you're not thinking straight, did you have coffee?" It wasn't that bad, but it did hurt my feelings. One moment that stands out was when I resisted when they were trying to make one of my characters in a dark fairy tale campaign an actual vampire. She would have to kill and consume a person every day and just derail the party plans, forcing them to travel at night. Not to mention the party probably being mad about the murders. So when I started not to like the idea of killing a shit ton of people, Iris got upset when I said I don't want to do this. They got so upset at me, they snapped at me, yelling about me making a mistake and that I should never play Warlock again, and we silently sat there after they deleted the character sheet. I am an anxious person who asked, did I make a mistake? They said yes. So at one point, Iris accused me of being unable to play my character correctly because I was starting my period. They had a creepy interest in that part of my health as well. So that's when we started bringing in our mediator Blue, the original OP. She's a fantastic person and she wanted to see the best in Iris, but also protect me because I was very young, 19 at the time, naive and clingy. So during the moderation, Blue settled us down, trying to get us both to think straight, and we patched it up. The thing is, it would become a habit. They would do something terrible and snap at me. We would go to Blue to moderate the conversation. Blue would talk some sense into Iris and tell me that I am justified in my feelings and I need to communicate more. During one of these conversations, Iris decided to take advantage of this and started to twist the words in their favor, saying that I'm a liar for not communicating my feelings very well, saying it is my fault for not telling them how I feel. Blue tried to put a stop to that as soon as they noticed, but it was already too late. Iris felt justified. So, to explain the complication during the first mediation, a while after that, Iris admitted to having a crush on me, just a small one, but a crush. In hindsight, I noticed that with the way they would have these incel characters flirt with mine. The first time it happened was with the vampire warlock. This dude she was flirting with to get information, and she led him to a spooky lake. He wouldn't take no for an answer. So she killed him because she was a ruthless, kind of uncaring creature. Iris then retaliated by making him immortal and giving him the ability to always track my character. Then it started happening more with the Barbie barbarian character and my rogue character, whom I am named after. And this was just really awkward after that, mainly because before the crush confession, they would say things embarrassed me because I had my phone on speaker all the time on calls. They would say, in quote, "Rogue, I care so much about you and I think you're a genuinely good person, and if I lived closer to you, I would date you." So yeah, that was awkward. What made things more embarrassing is if you scroll back to the top, they told me not to flirt with them when we first met. Remember, when I said I had to flirt with a character for my vampire character, Iris has this cute little rule that you had to flirt with them, not the NPC. You have to seduce me, not the character. As you know, we barely had free time with Iris. They would call us constantly. First it started with Psychic, then Ranger, me, and then after me it was Blue. During these calls, Iris criticized me and my future decisions when I was underage. And I was talking about when I was 21 I would try alcohol. They got upset with me, saying that if I did that I would get addicted and they wouldn't be friends with me anymore. They were trying to control my life through a screen. One way that sticks out of my mind is that they would make fun of me in cruel ways. I have a massive insecurity and I told them about this, thinking I can trust them. Then one day on call we were watching YouTube and then we stopped to talk about my insecurity a little. They then said to me, "What if you met the perfect person who loves and cares for you and treated you kindly but then saw your insecurity and called you disgusting?" I was too stunned to speak for a while, and then I was honest and I said I'd be heartbroken and that question actually hurt. So I respected the boundary that they had established in the beginning and that the subject was never mentioned again. Although what hurt even worse was when we were talking about Unsexy again and what happened to my character, the Barbie Barbarian. We realized Iris's fetish affects the game. As you can see, it impacts Blue's character. It also affected mine. See, my Barbie Barbarian most of the time before the campaign started spent most of her time hypnotized, which was Iris's thing. The hypnosis and the mind control for both characters were Iris's idea, and as later confessed, their favorite kink. TLDR, Iris was my best friend. I thought they had my best interests at heart, but all they did was hurt me, yell at me, and try to control me. Also, you can tell Iris is very controlling, and I'm glad I have my wonderful group of friends, and I'm glad we left that situation. And that concludes the perspective of the person who's been called rogue in all these stories. I think this epilogue adds another layer to kind of the tragedy of the situation. The thing about Dungeons & Dragons is it's a great way to connect with people, and there's probably a lot of people who reached out to Iris over the years, kind of looking for that initial connection, and then getting dragged through the mud until they eventually were kicked out or had to suffer through it multiple sessions like the writers in these stories. This kind of goes back to a saying that's said a lot in the community, and it's for good reason. No D&D is better than bad D&D. But the question is, how do you know what bad D&D looks like if you're starting out? Because it's not going to look like Matt Mercer or Brendan Lee Mulligan's campaigns, right out the gate. There's going to be some awkwardness. There's going to be some mixed messages. Not everyone's going to be comfortable just with playing the game, let alone their dynamics as people with each other. It's actually very hard to gauge what is good D&D. When you're going in blind and you don't know what is a good and a bad D&D group, you're going to have to just kind of rely on picking someone in a social circle you have that you trust and using their judgment maybe to determine if it's a good fit for you. Obviously, there's no guarantee, but it's really going to be your best shot, because otherwise you have to go on public forums like Roll20, join a half a dozen campaigns and hope one of them kind of sticks. Now, let's jump into the last epilogue. This one is written by Blue, which is the original writer of the first 3 Betrayal Mountain stories, and it's going to be called Iris herself. Hey there, fellow horror story enthusiasts. It has finally come time for the final horror story I will be posting about my group's former DM, who we will call Iris. While I have enough stories to probably make an additional few posts, I think I've tortured you enough. In these stories, I will refer to everyone involved besides Iris by the class they played in the first campaign I joined the group for. Today's topic will cover how we try to deal with Iris, how the group finally jumped ship and took the oars with us, and how we're doing now. But first, I think it's finally time to reveal why we call Iris Iris. Thank you for reading TLDR and past stories about Iris at the bottom. The all-seeing Iris. So I think it's a pretty common thing for DMs to have reoccurring characters who appeared either in multiple campaigns or even in every one of their campaigns. I have one of my own my players haven't met yet, and I think we can all agree that as long as these characters don't become the main focus, or as long as they stay in the background, or really be anything other than an oppressive in-your-face distraction, there isn't really any problem with a reoccurring character or two. Iris didn't have one or two, Iris had many. The evil council from the prequel campaign I mentioned, recurring characters, Melissa especially is apparently one of Iris's favorites, who is quite often criminal genius that the party can't defeat. Nelby and her council of undead children from the fairy tale campaign, wow, they're also recurring villains who you probably cannot defeat. Iris's favorite artificer super genius that the players cannot ever beat because they have infinite simulacrums, recurring character. Funny side note, Iris said no matter what, this guy was the most handsome character. Also, while we couldn't defeat him, his stolen player character turned NPC could in a cutscene. So these characters and a few others I think prove Iris kinda had a thing for making every recurring character be a smarter than the player's villain. However, there is one recurring villain who stands far and above the rest of them. I'd like to introduce the omnipotent, omnipresent, omnipotent, omni-pain-in-our-ass goddess of mimetic evil, Iris. Yes, Iris put themselves in the game as a fourth wall breaking goddess of evil who showed up everywhere, was responsible for literally everything, and was my actual eye in game. Yeah, the flags are as crimson as Iris's eyes is. The giant floating eyeball evil god was our DM with all of their meta knowledge. To differentiate the real person and the goddess, I will continue to call our former DM Iris, and let's call the evil god Pink Eye. Pink Eye had a meta knowledge from every game Iris has ever put her in, which is apparently all of them. If a player outsmarted her in one way in the past campaign, even a past group, then Pink Eye in a future campaign could never be outsmarted the same way again, because they had all the DM's knowledge. No matter what patron you chose, if you took Warlock in game, Pink Eye was your secret patron. Warlocks were basically accidental clerics of Pink Eye. In the Sky City campaign before I joined the group, there were 2 Warlocks multi-classes, and they took different patrons only to find out their patrons were both somehow Pink Eye, despite being voiced differently. Remember, the goddess of evil who made multiple deals with the party in the prequel campaign before turning a player character into an infinitely powerful NPC boss? Yeah, that was Pink Eye. Remember Scarlet's grandma, who was secretly for some reason responsible for every bad thing that had ever happened to the party, ever, and made them sign a magic contract saying that they would never try to harm her? Yeah, that was Pink Eye. Iris revealed after canceling the campaign that Pink Eye had trapped Nelby in her Strahd-esque hell and turned her into a villain, and then made all of us come there to screw with Nelby even more. My orphan raised by the wolves? Yeah, she was a homunculus made by Pink Eye so that Iris could give their self-insert god even more control over our backgrounds. In one campaign, Iris even forced Rogue to play Pink Eye's demigod daughter, and then just had it basically be a trauma fest of Pink Eye torturing Rogue in her dreams every birthday. It's a good thing we never had a campaign actually make it all the way to the end, because it turns out Pink Eye was responsible for every villain and all the chaos in every campaign, and was apparently the actual secret final boss of multiple campaigns. This was spoiled to us, by the way. All we know about the fight is that Pink Eye was stronger than Nelby, who was stronger than the CR40 vampire mommy, etc. So I'm pretty sure the fight would have been unwinnable. Iris told us Pink Eye was so strong that there were no other evil gods in any of their campaigns because Pink Eye was above all them leaps and bounds. In the longest lasting campaign, Iris told us that if Pink Eye ever died in any campaign, she would die in every campaign as she was meta existence. When the party started to actually talk about hunting Pink Eye down at max level and killing her, suddenly Iris changed their mind and said Pink Eye cannot be killed except one universe at a time, and she existed in every possible multiverse ever. What a fun and interesting enemy. We asked Iris many times to please stop reusing all the villains and especially Pink Eye. Iris' very telling response was, "I will never stop using these characters in my games because using them over and over is how I have fun." I think it goes without saying at this point, but Iris basically admitted that they hate it when players beat one of their villains. We actually left soon after they said this. The straw that breaks. So let's talk about why the group didn't recognize sooner everything wrong with Iris and leave immediately, as well as how we tried to fix it and how it ended. What you need to know about Iris is that they feel so close to being an excellent DM. Iris puts a lot of detail in characters even if their world building is a bit off. Iris had a talent for making characters, villains, and settings feel very interesting in the moment. The Dark Fairy Tale campaign seemed amazing for the first couple of sessions until it was revealed that it was just Diet Curse of Strahd, and the fairy tale references stopped. Cecil the Giant Robot Inventor seemed like a compelling character until he showed up a dozen times in 5 sessions, and Iris revealed he couldn't be reasoned with but wouldn't leave us alone. And perhaps most importantly, Iris seemed like a friend until they didn't. Iris is a sad person. They'd presented themselves in a confident and professional manner, but it was all a lie. Iris would draw you in and pretend to care about you, to want to know all your secrets and support you, but they really just wanted to control us and have ammunition to make fun of us, even if they didn't realize it themselves. Iris wanted us to be at their beck and call. We weren't Iris's friends. We were Iris's audience and victims. Iris presented themselves as a confident person secretly filled with insecurities. I don't want to assume it was all on purpose, but Iris wields their problems as a get-out-of-jail-free card. They are a master manipulator, and I don't believe all of it was unintentional, but I also don't think it was all intended to cause harm. Regardless of intention, it was bad. Iris would kick out any player who they saw as a threat, a person likely to call them out. They preyed on marginalized people while presenting themselves as one. Any man who joined the group, if Iris didn't consider them queer-coded, and they had any degree of experience, they were gone. Longtime players who weren't passive, gone. Basically, Iris sought out kind passive people to surround themselves with, and then held on with a vice grip. I don't want to maximize the pain Iris caused, nor the fact that I firmly believe they should not be in this hobby, but the anxiety they showed, the fear of being left alone, that much was real and it tugged at our heartstrings. They painted themselves as a martyr and used it as a weapon to keep us close. There is no red flag more vibrantly crimson about Iris than the fact they advertised themselves as an expert DM who had over a dozen years of experience and whose favorite part of TTRPGs is making friends, and yet they don't have a single past player still willing to play with them. In fact, as far as I know, none even want to talk to them. But there's a reason the boiling frog metaphor is a thing. Iris had major control issues, some of which stem from their past and some which they are causing themselves by refusing to let go of the reins or even trying to change just a little bit. Towards the end, we saw Iris spiral and establish and quickly destroy a second group where they made a 5e campaign where level 1 casters didn't have enough magic to cast any spells. That group didn't even last 2 weeks. Iris had gotten so paranoid about players being able to break their unfair worlds that they considered literally everything power gaming and overpowered. Iris only listens temporarily to any criticism or boundary. They put on a facade of respectability and understanding, but they don't really care. A month or two after I joined the group, the party started giving a gentle correction to Iris. Sometimes they would adjust a bit, and it would seem like they listened, but it always reversed to new players. Eventually, this reached a head when Iris was in a call with Rogue and yelled at them. Iris really wanted to control Rogue, the youngest of us, most out of anyone, and when Rogue resisted about this, Iris wanting to make their character a murderous true vampire, Iris blew up, and long story short, we tried to fix things and I mediated the first of several observed calls between Iris and Rogue. Before I expand on this, Iris asked me not to tell anyone about any of this, which was in hindsight just further attempts to control the group. Iris and Rogue had a conversation where I helped them come to a conclusion that Iris shouldn't be alone in calls with Rogue anymore. We were trying to fix the friendship between the two of them, but we probably should have dropped Iris there in hindsight. From there, I began to regularly sit in on any call where Rogue and Iris were together to try and talk Iris step by step through things and try to help Rogue clearly lay out their grievances. To be honest, there are probably hundreds of pages of materials worth of things to write about her, but long story short is we tried very hard to help Iris improve their behavior and to make the friend group stable. None of it worked, and Iris eventually admitted they weren't even going to try anymore. I would like to add in here that all the help we tried to give Iris was largely prompted by Iris asking us to help them become better, but it wasn't really genuine. Iris would say things like, "Please help me. I don't know what is offensive. You have to tell me. I don't know what isn't hurtful. It's not my fault and my autism makes me not understand." Never mind they weaponized their autism when half the party was on the spectrum. We were manipulated to the very end. Iris's harassments of Rogue and Ranger reached a breaking point, and Rogue left with Ranger leaving minutes after. Rogue had just been waiting for someone else to quit. At this point, Psychic, Barbarian, Fighter, and myself were all about just done with Iris anyways. We had given them more than the benefit of the doubt, and more chances than any truly well-adjusted person would. Within minutes of Rogue's departure message, Iris canceled all long-term campaigns that had been running because I can't bring myself to run campaigns she was in. I would think about her every time. The rest of us lasted one session longer. After Iris started a new campaign and we had that first session, I realized I'm only here for the other players. So I asked Psychic if they wanted to leave. Psychic said yes. We asked Barbarian and Fighter. They said yes, with Fighter saying watching the dumpster fire had lost its charm. And just like that, Iris was gone. We all blocked them at the same time after firing off a warning to the brand new players about what we were doing, and it was definitely the right choice. No D&D is better than bad D&D, and a bad friend isn't a friend at all. Thankfully, this didn't leave us with no D&D. The after party. So the group may have left Iris, but none of us lost each other. My first campaign is still running over a year later, and the gang is all still here. And on top of this, Barbarian stepped up and took over DMing the remnants of the traditional fantasy campaign Iris canceled. And Barbarian, yeah, he is an amazing DM. We have been having an absolute blast, and none of us really had any problems from the group as far as I can tell. We started having Cards Against Humanity nights, movie nights, hanging out all the time. To me, these people are family now. To be blunt, I love my group. We are just having an absolute blast. I even ran a spoof rhyming Grinch one-shot where the party had to deal with a beholder who had pink eye named Iris, who was retconning all the characters' lives and even Santa out of existence. When the party got close to beating Iris, they retconned their minions' deaths several times before the minions got sick of it and started a union. They even ripped up a character sheet, killing an NPC, and retconned a party member's trauma to try to make them less adventure-y. We are happy. Pretty much the moment we left Iris behind, the stress disappeared. This gaming group, I think we're going the distance. My first campaign is about to enter its final arc. The players are achieving goals IRL, we support and love each other. Our ending with Iris wasn't particularly exciting or explosive, but it ended up so satisfying. Iris did their absolute best to keep us separated, and because of that, they brought us all together. Iris is the villain of a closed chapter of our story, and we still have so many pages to fill. Remember, if you see the red eye of Iris gazing down upon you, don't go towards the light. Thanks for reading. TLDR, monstrously controlling and manipulative DM goes out of their way to control their players, destroy anything they try to do in-game, try to manipulate and isolate everyone out of the game, and generally drag the party along as a miserable audience to their unbeatable villain showcase. In the end, they brought a bunch of people together and drove away everyone who cared about them. All hail Pink Eye. I'd really like to thank Blue for taking the time to share all these stories. In total, that was 9 different stories, all showcasing a lot of red flags you might experience in a DM. Now, out of game, this person seems to be a very textbook narcissist. They're definitely doing everything in the playbook to make themselves seem like the victim while like basically preying upon all these young and new players. And I'm really sorry that any of you guys had to go through this, but it sounds like what happened at the end is better than most RPG horror stories I've ever seen. It's great to hear that you guys are having not one, but 2 fantastic campaigns, and overall the group is going fantastic. I like that you said that no D&D is better than bad D&D. I'm actually reading this last part for the first time, and I didn't realize that that was something you were going to say, so that's really cool that you've kind of grown, because it's a very simple piece of advice, and it might feel wrong to do initially because you feel bad about all you're leaving behind, but it really is such a freeing thing just to step away from a bad game. The way I always see it is, especially if you meet people online with Roll20 or something, you don't have to feel loyal. You didn't know them 5 months ago. You're never going to know them again once you block them, you know? And those who you do feel loyal with, you did the perfect thing here and you took them to another campaign. So don't feel like just because you're walking away, you have to cut all of it as a loss. And I hope other people learn that lesson quicker thanks to your stories. Now, while I might admit that the pink eye beholder probably is a little petty, I'm sure your group loved it, and honestly, I'm all for it too. Sometimes you just gotta vent out your frustration, you know? And honestly, it's kind of a great character for a one-shot because it's a one and done and you don't have to feel like it ruins the logic of your game. So I might actually run something like that in the future. For everyone still watching it, make sure to like and subscribe to the video and show some love to Rogue and Blue for putting together these stories. I'm sure there's a lot that happened that you guys had to curate to get this final story, so I really appreciate the effort that the whole party did for this. And I'm so glad there's a happy ending. Thanks, old Loot Goblin, that was quite a doozy. Now on to the much more comedic final story given by Blue and the reason for this video being made. There are no black people in Australia. I was reminiscing about some good laughs I've had with the party and remembered a rather funny incident from a former DM of ours. For anyone who has read my past posts, yeah, this was the same DM, but this story is a lot shorter, lighter, and will truly be the last story I post about a former DM I'll call Iris. Iris decided to launch a side campaign alongside their 5e campaign, this time in a slightly homebrewed version of Mage the Awakening. The campaign was set at the start of a roaring 20s in New York City. We all made some creative characters, had a couple introductory minis, and Iris decided to add an extra player. And this is how we met our lovely fighter. The party was hanging out in chat, talking about silly things, and Iris entered the call, very excited to talk about the new player and his character. I don't remember exact phrasing, but it went something like this. Oh man, the new guy is super sweet and interesting. He's from Australia and I think he's gonna be a great addition. He's gonna play a black character who's struggling to make ends meet so he can understand what it's like to face racism in America in the 1920s. There was a bit of an awkward silence as we all decided to try to figure out how to respond to this. Never mind the assertion that a white Canadian could accurately represent racism in a different country to the degree it would make another white person fully comprehend what it was like. There was a couple more important questions first. Iris, did he actually say that? Well, no, but he wouldn't pick a poor black person if he didn't care, right? Are you sure he's white? He's from Australia, so yeah. I swear you could feel everyone staring at their screens. Iris, there are black people in Australia, like a lot of them. What? No, there probably aren't more than a few, right? He sounds white. A, the native folk there are mostly black, aren't they? B, people can move, and C, did you ask him? There was a bit of back and forth as Iris was pretty confident Fighter was white, but eventually we convinced Iris to actually ask before making assumptions. Iris left the call to chat with Fighter and returned about 2 minutes later and in a mortified voice said the following, "Guys, he's black." And this is the story of how we all got to spend several minutes laughing our asses off. TLDR, our DM didn't know that not everyone in Australia was white, asserted a player wanted to play a black character to understand racism. And that right there just kind of showcases how confidently Iris is wrong on so many occasions, just arguing constantly in bad faith with people, assuming that they knew the whole situation with zero of the facts. So it actually looks like Lucas, the barbarian in this story, chimes in the comments, just talking a little bit more about it, and they say the following. Hey there, Barbarian here from these stories. I fortunately remember an additional part to the story. Iris called me shortly after they told the group about Fighter's character, asking me what to do about someone else wanting to play a black character, even though they may not be black because I am a black man growing up in the States. I asked them, first, are you sure they aren't black? He responded, I'm pretty sure he's from Australia, so there's a low chance. I sat in silence for a brief moment out of shock before telling him, Iris, black people live all across the world and can come from pretty much every country. This is what he responded with. "Oh, I wasn't sure about it. I haven't met many black people here where I live. I just figured not many black people lived in Australia." I then told him, "Just because you haven't seen many doesn't mean they don't live there. Look, just ask if he is black, and if not, we'll talk about how to proceed. Beyond that point, you all know the rest. Thanks for posting this funny little story, Blue." What I find very strange about this situation is why Iris cared at all. Because honestly, in a fantasy setting, people sometimes want to play out scenarios that they could not in real life. It is a fantasy game. People want to gain perspective. And as long as there's no malicious intent behind it, it's weird that Iris would assume that's bad faith out the gate, especially for a new player. And especially given the context that every time we've interacted with Iris in these stories, they're always pushing uncomfortable scenarios on people because they want to push their agenda. I mean, just look back to the first few stories alone. They themselves were not very comfortable with romantic situations, so they kept putting their players in uncomfortable situations, and when they tried to, so to speak, pick romance options, the person always turned out to be a predator because Iris wanted to make sure that you knew that every situation was predatorial, because that's what they believe. I feel like sadly, more times than not, a person like Iris will blow up a party and many people will not return to try a TTRPG in the future. Blue and their friends are still very close, they still have many fond memories, and they played many games after dealing with Iris. I was very lucky that my first DM was a veteran in his own self who grew up playing with an older brother who loved playing 2nd edition Dungeons & Dragons. And from what I could tell from his stories, advanced D&D was very unforgiving, but never bad faith. As the DM, I am not your enemy, I'm the facilitator of the story. And I want to do an unforgiving story, but that doesn't mean that I want you to lose. And I always feel like a bad DM like this, who wants to be the adversary, who even out of game is already asking questions in bad faith to be the opponent of you as a person, that is not a DM. That's not even really a friend. That's someone you should run far, far away from. And luckily this party was able to, mostly unscathed. And now, on that lighter note, the story of Iris is officially concluded. Thank you for stopping by, and I hope to see you in the next video. Farewell for now. Please like and subscribe, as it really helps the channel grow, and if you want to further support the channel, you can become a member on YouTube or on my Patreon. Thank you to everyone who's already subscribed. You make these videos possible.